Our lesson today is focusing on reptiles. So we're moving on from amphibians, who spend half their lives in water and half on land, whereas reptiles were the first vertebrates to successfully live their whole lives on land. So as you're listening to the video and watching the PowerPoint, make sure to be taking notes in your notebook. On the slides where you're required to take notes, I put a picture of a crocodile on the top left corner. You can pause or rewind the video as needed. Let's begin by classifying reptiles. Hopefully by now we're familiar with their domain, their kingdom, their phylum, and their class is also easy, Reptilia. So all reptiles are in the class Reptilia. We'll be talking about 3 orders of reptiles. That includes Squamata. Squamata includes lizards and snakes. We'll go into more detail later. Our next order is Crocodilia. Crocodilia includes crocodiles, alligators, caiman. Again, we'll go into more details later. And lastly, Testudines. Testudines include tortoises and turtles. Let's go over some general characteristics that all reptiles have in common. All reptiles are vertebrates, right? Because they're all in the phylum Chordata. Most reptiles are tetrapods. This allows them to meet their need for movement. Maybe you caught on that snakes, for instance, don't have 4 limbs, so they would be an exception. Reptiles are ectothermic. This allows them to meet their need for homeostasis. They can regulate their body temperature using the external or outside environment. Reptiles, throughout their whole lives, have lungs, which helps them obtain oxygen. Reptiles are also classified by their scaly, rough skin, and that plays a specific role for them, which we'll look more into later. It might be important to note here that reptiles have a similar circulatory system as amphibians. They have a 3-chambered heart where the blood goes from the right atrium, ventricle, lungs, left atrium, ventricle, body, and in a loop like that. Now, as mentioned previously, reptiles were the first vertebrates that were adapted to live their lives fully on land. Now, I recognize that this doesn't mean they all live on land, right? We have sea snakes, we have sea turtles, we have crocodiles and alligators. However, reptiles as a whole were the first group that were able to live on land. This meant a few things. This meant that they needed to get their oxygen from the air as opposed to the water, meaning they needed lungs. Additionally, this meant that they had to lay their eggs on land. So this posed as a challenge because eggs, developing embryos, are particularly prone to drying out. So laying eggs on land posed a challenge for reptiles. We're going to be focusing largely on the adaptations that have allowed reptiles to survive and thrive on land. So, looking at some of those adaptations, we can think of land animals as bags of water covered in skin. Essentially, if we live on land, our body's job is to keep the water inside. If you look at the human body, a large portion of our body consists of water, and our body does a great job of keeping that inside. Similarly with reptiles. We're going to be focusing on a few different characteristics of reptiles that are particularly well adapted to help them conserve water. For one, we'll look at their skin. We'll look at an organ called the kidney, and we'll look at how their eggs are structured to help conserve water. Looking first at their skin, we mentioned previously that reptiles have rough, thick, and scaly skin. What do you think this does for them? Hopefully, you came up with the idea that it keeps water in. Although the crocodile and alligator skin looks dry and scaly on the outside, it does a great job of keeping the water inside. A second major adaptation for living their life on land is the kidney. The kidney is the organ that filters waste out of the blood and concentrates it into urine. Urine, or pee, whatever you want to call it, is our body's waste that's produced by the kidney. If you notice in reptile urine, it's much more concentrated or much less diluted or liquidy than mammal urine. This is because reptiles need to conserve as much water as possible, and they're not going to give up that water to urine. So again, the kidney is what concentrates all of that waste from the blood into the urine. And the reptile's kidney does a good job of keeping the water in the body, getting the waste out. A third adaptation to life on land is the reptile egg, also known as the amniotic egg. An amniotic egg is an egg that has an outer shell, consists of an embryo on the inside, and has internal membranes that help regulate gases, waste, and keep fluid inside of the egg. I'd like you to pause the video here and draw an amniotic egg, labeling the different structures. A fun fact regarding reptile eggs is that the sex or the gender of many species of reptiles is actually determined by temperature. So if we look at this graph, we see that as the temperature increases, so maybe if the female laid the eggs in warmer soil or if it was a warmer environment, as the temperature increases, we see more males. In cooler environments, we see more females. Okay, we're going to be looking at the different groups of reptiles. We'll start with Squamata and go over those characteristics. Move on to Crocodilia, talk briefly about Testudines, and we'll discuss why dinosaurs are not actually reptiles. Looking first at Squamata. This includes lizards and snakes. These animals have overlapping scales. They shed their skin as they grow, so maybe you've seen some snake skin or lizard skin hanging around. And they tend to live in warm areas. Animals in the order Squamata are mostly carnivorous, meaning they eat other animals. They have many different means of capturing their prey, especially snakes. Some snakes use constriction or suffocation to get their prey. Others have well-adapted fangs that can release venom. However, there's only about 300 species of venomous snakes out of about 2,500 different species. So most snakes aren't venomous. This order has basically the ability to eat massive prey. So if we look at this small snake in comparison to this giant egg, we might question how it's able to fit the egg in its mouth. It does not dislocate its jaw. So there is a myth going around that snakes dislocate or disconnect their jaw in order to eat their prey. Dislocating a joint is actually very painful, and that's not what happens when snakes eat their prey. Rather, their lower mandible or their lower jaw has this stretchy ligament right here that allows them to open their jaw extremely wide. So they basically just have a stretchier jaw than most other animals. This group includes geckos, Komodo dragons, chameleons, cobras, boas, rattlesnakes, brown tree snakes, etc. I will take a moment to talk very briefly about brown tree snakes in Guam. Brown tree snakes were introduced to Guam via airplanes. So they crawled up into the wheel wells of planes, and crawled out and populated the island of Guam. This took a major toll on the native bird population of Guam, and now Guam has very few native birds left. So that's why Hawaii is so strict about what we bring in and what we bring out of our state, because we want to do our very best to preserve the animals that are here. So it's actually someone's job at the airport to make sure no snakes crawl out of the planes. We'll take a look at this video next time. Our next group, Crocodilia, includes alligators and crocodiles. These are large carnivores that care for their young. So as vicious and predatory as they may seem, they actually care for their young until the young are old enough to take care of themselves. They can live in freshwater or saltwater. And this includes caimans, alligators, crocodiles, etc. You can tell whether it's a caiman, an alligator, or a crocodile by looking at the snout. Our last group, Testudines, includes turtles. These animals have a protective shell, which is actually a modification of their backbone. So when you're looking at a tortoise or a turtle's shell, that's actually their backbone that has been shaped into a shell. They can be carnivorous. We know that some sea turtles eat jellyfish. Or they can be herbivores. If any of you have pet tortoises at home, you know they love fruits and veggies. And depending on the species, these animals can live on land, in freshwater, or in saltwater. Some examples might be the green sea turtle, the loggerhead sea turtle, the leatherback sea turtle, Galapagos tortoise, a few others. Now, a question that I'm going to pose for you involves sea turtle conservation. Our sea turtle populations are severely at risk, and I'd like you to take a minute to think about and maybe discuss with your partner some ideas as to why you think they might be more sensitive to climate and environmental change than other organisms. Some things that we know are that temperatures on land are increasing. Think about what temperature has to do with reptiles. We also know that turtles are natal homers, meaning they instinctively return to the same beach that they were born at. We also know that coastal storms such as hurricanes are increasing both in number, meaning there's more, and severity, meaning they're getting worse. So pause the video for a moment here and jot down some ideas. We'll be discussing this next time. Lastly, just some reasoning as to why dinosaurs are not considered reptiles. Dinosaurs are an extinct group that we know about from fossils. They died out about 65 million years ago in a major extinction event where about half of all living species went extinct. Rather than being closely related to reptiles, dinosaurs are actually more closely related to birds. We know this because they are endotherms. So they are not ectotherms, they are endotherms. And if we look at their anatomy or their body structure, we see that dinosaurs' limbs are directly under their body, whereas reptiles, amphibians, their limbs are kind of sprawled out to the side. Again, we'll discuss this later. I apologize, I know this video was very quick. Hopefully you took the opportunity to pause it and rewind it as needed. Your homework is going to be the 11.4 questions. I've posted them on Google Classroom, and you actually only need to do 1 and 2 as opposed to 1 through 3 like the plan sheet says. Make sure to write down any questions that you have for me, and we will review this material next time I see you.